I want to get started on behalf of Pro to CO. We want to thank you for coming. We obviously are in transition of different sessions, so we appreciate you all being here at this time. My name is Kevin Carr. I work as a CEO of Pro to CO, a transition company that allows us to work with athletes, artists, and executives about their transition. And we think it was very important and significant to address transition. A lot of people have to make moves. We all have to go from one level to the next. And it was important for us to change the narrative of transition because we've seen so many times when people leave one thing that they've been very good at and move to the next, there's often been some challenge in that. But we have been working with strategies as a firm, and we have been working with different leagues, associations, from amateur all the way to retired pro in that space. And we've been having success in that in the last 5 years. So much so that we wanted to put together a platform that allowed people to engage. So today is really about us having conversations around a very, very important topic, and I'll obviously allow our moderator to talk more in depth, but we want you to be engaged. We still have more people coming, so don't fear. There are different things going on, so we realize that, but today really is about our panelists and allowing them to have what I call courageous conversations around important issues that deal with society, whether it's climate, whether it's activism, whether it's immigration, whether it's social justice, et cetera. That's what we're going to get into, and we hope to see more out of this conversation grow as a result. But before that, I'd like to have one of the representatives from the Congressman's office, Margaret Anderson. Would you please come on up and bring greetings on behalf of Congressman Al Lawson?
Thank you all for being here this afternoon. This is a topic very important to Congressman Lawson. As one of the few members of Congress who has actually played professionally at the student level and has also coached, he understands the importance of what that transition looks like from being a student to going to pros to going into a totally different life outside of sports. So this is something very, very important to him. He apologizes for not being here. He is back in Tallahassee on business. But again, you know, this is something incredibly important to him. We've recently introduced a bill called the NCAA Act that gets rid of the one and done rule, provides additional health coverage for student athletes that were injured while playing sports. And it also provides a grant program for student athletes that have gone into the pros that didn't finish their degree for a certain amount of time to be able to return to school and complete that degree. So this is something very important to him. He often tells stories about you know, some of the people that he's played with today who may not be in such great shape in terms of their life. People that didn't have anything to fall back on once sports was out of the picture. So that transition is incredibly important, and it's something that we talk about in terms of how do we not only allow students to reach their potential athletically, but how do we prepare them beyond the court. So we just thank you all for hosting. Thank you all for providing the conversation for this. And we hope to continue it legislatively. So just know that the Congressman understands these issues and is a friend of the community. So thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Mr. Clinton Yates. Clinton is a columnist. He's from DC, and he is particularly with The Undefeated. If you haven't seen them, obviously they're writing and putting together great content for us to enjoy and to have discussion. So without further ado, Mr. Clinton Yates, please welcome him.
You don't have to clap. I'm a normal person. Okay. Thank you, though. I'm messing around. Y'all are very serious. This is a very serious topic, but I just want you to know that I'm not that serious of a person. I just like to discuss serious things. So that's how we go. I'm just going to say personally, like, for everybody who's here, thank you all for coming. I realize that, you know, time is a big part of what I think we're talking about here, how people use it, how people choose to help others use theirs, and what we do going forward is, you know, try to best maximize what the different times are. So I can read bios if you guys like, in case everybody doesn't know who everybody is, which I will do. But as for me, I covered politics, pop culture, and then I moved to the sports world. I'm from DC, so all of this in terms of everything you think about the way athletes operate, people being around communities, the concept of recidivism in terms of a lot of different parts of life. That's all just sort of what I grew up with. So that's who I am. That's what I bring to the table. Forget about my job. That's just the person I am. So with no further ado, let us read. Our first person is Paxton Baker. Paxton is a managing partner for Liquid Soul Media. It's an Atlanta-based agency providing solutions, unique design, and award-winning campaign for its clients. Long story short, this guy works in TV, and he's an entertainment guy, and you have a lot of experience as far as that's concerned, and bringing that to this table. Maya Moore, if you don't know who Maya is, then I don't know where you've been in your life. Tremendous human, great athlete, and beyond that, at this point, as we know, an activist who is committed to what she believes in. The mayor, as everybody, as everybody calls you, I've just met him today, so I will do my best to live up to the expectations. Wayne Messam, he's, I just realized I actually remember when you played now, having looked at your pictures. Former football player, also served as the mayor of Miramar, and I think what your expertise is going to bring to this is both sides of that, the political and the athletic. Talia, am I messing this up? Talia. Okay. I have a friend named Talia, and so I read that, and I messed it up. Talia is very nice, and I've messed up her name twice now, and I feel like a jerk. But Talia started in the NFL, and as she was telling me before the show, moved here as a result of that, and community relations and public affairs, that's what you did, and so you bring the NFL side of this to the conversation, and I'm very interested in this for personal reasons, which is that I'm a fan of that team, and so they have a very unique situation that they exist in as well, so I would be interested as to how your thoughts are going to proceed with that. And Isaac Jones, who I've just met today. Isaac Jones from Philadelphia, went to Purdue on a football scholarship, and now you work in the business world, from what I understand. So the money side is obviously a big part of all of this. So enough of all that. Let's get to the talking. I'm tired of talking. First thing I want to say is, where do you think the United States of America is specifically in terms of respecting anybody after they get out of what is supposed to be their due, whatever, like their station in life? After you start playing, after you stop rapping, or after you get off TV. I'd be interested to think, just from your, not just personal experience, but from your observation experience, after the whistle blows for the last time, whatever that may be in the walk of life, where do you think we are in terms of how we accept those people back into society for what they used to do? You can start at the end. I'll start with you.
Okay, so first off, thank you everybody for coming out today, and Congressman Lawson for hosting us. We have a wonderful group of panelists up here. I'm looking forward to the discussion with them. Thank you so much for being the moderator. So I had a 26-year career at Black Entertainment Television, and as president of BT Productions and general manager of Civic. And early on in my career, I began to think about what I wanted to do next in life, and that entertainment, as fulfilling as it was, I've had the opportunity to produce music festivals around the whole of the world, and award shows, Soul Train Awards, Source Awards, et cetera. I wanted to think about what I wanted to do, so I started to lay the groundwork for myself for that. Back in 2005, had the opportunity to join with the Lerner family here in Washington, and we ended up purchasing the Washington Nationals Baseball Club from Major League Baseball. So I think, part of, at least from what I saw in the questions, is we were kind of like supposed to talk about our story and a little bit about what we wanted to do. For me, every day that you're doing whatever it is that you do, I think you should be doing the best job at what you're doing presently, but also thinking about what you'd like to do next. So for me, it was literally putting investments in place for myself, putting seeds in place for myself by way of joining boards and organizations to begin to work through what I would want my next steps to be like. So when the time came for me to leave Black Entertainment Television and Viacom, I was prepared to do so. and had put good, solid seeds in the ground, which had grown and actually begun to go up high enough to have a little bit of shade for myself. So part of it is volunteering. To me, that's a critical part of my life. It's something that's been a part of the DNA of my life, has been volunteering. So I started working with community organizations when I was younger, and also volunteering on arts organizations and organizations to actually help young people have a better life, which I was the beneficiary of other people being kind enough to do that for myself. So volunteering is the core of my life, my DNA, and fortunately, the boards and organizations that I began to grow to actually began to help me develop a lot more relationships. So the next part that I would say for myself, the relationships that I've been able to build over the years that have held up, and in my professional career have helped me a lot. So it wasn't so much for me a thing of like thinking about what America was going to do for me or how America would view me or other people would view me. It was more, one, how I viewed myself, and then two, the things that I could put in place for myself to cushion the next steps or the next things that I was going to do for the different parts of my career on the other side of what it was that I was doing.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, the first idea that popped in my head with the connection of, America, the public, and the connection to the athlete is there's no question. If you are in the public eye, you are put on a pedestal. You are seen as kind of this superhero, kind of this, celebrity, super successful, and you have to constantly balance the kind of the dehumanizing element of that reality of people think you're this video game. And so, and to understand, like, you're a person who's had an exceptional experience that's not normal. And so when you're transitioning out of that, or you're doing something else, like you hear about people going bankrupt, you hear about just some wild stories because we're humans and we need help. And so I think giving yourself that space to really kind of humanize as you transition and seeing that it's sooner than later can help that transition of how do you fit into your community. Because we all fit into a community, but when we're doing these kind of bigger than life things, it's hard to really fit into a community. And so the sooner you can kind of wrestle with how is that going to work, I think it's more helpful, and also giving yourself some grace to know you're not going to be super big time in whatever's next off the bat, and there's a process. So I guess that's kind of the main word. You'll probably hear me using that a lot, of just kind of the humanizing, like what does it look to really kind of sit back and figure out, all right, I have limitations, I need help, there's a process. And I think people are refreshed when they see their superstars, whether it's in the business world, entertainment, sports, say, hey, I'm human. And it's really powerful. It's more powerful than we think when we come off that stage where we have to look strong all the time and to really go through that journey. So
Thank you.
we're going to share a mic today.
I'll share
Is
it.
there? Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mayor Wayne Messam from Miramar, Florida. I guess my role and position with these esteemed panelists here, in short, my background, being a first-generation American, my parents are from Jamaica, and I was the first of their children born here in the United States. Growing up in South Florida, and I just happened to be a lanky, nerdy kid that had the ability to run fast, jump, catch a football, and was recruited by many universities when I graduated from Glade Central High School. Went to Florida State University, where I was a member of the first national championship team my freshman year, playing with some phenomenal athletes and current even Hall of Famers like Derek Brooks, Walter Jones, and actually come from a hometown that breeds football players like Fred Taylor, Riedel Anthony. We all played on the same high school team. So I think to the question in terms of how society sees athletes and perceive them, and once that phase of your life is complete, then what happens? I think in that process, the celebrity is birthed based off your athletic ability and the way you make them feel as an athlete, playing for their favorite team or as a nemesis of the arch rival. And that is their image, view, perception of you. And within the realm of the game, within the sport, there's very little interaction in terms of the humanness of you, in terms of who you are as a person. So that's why it's so vital as an athlete that you quickly find your purpose besides just what you do as a craft, or as an athlete. What are your passions outside of the field, outside of the court, outside of the track? And to make those investments while you are in the spotlight, so that you can make that transition. I don't fault society for those perceptions, because sports, athletics is ingrained in our society, and it's something that we all enjoy. I was very upset. I'm still upset right now with the prospects of Florida State University as we transition to get back to prominence. But that's just the fact of us wanting to see our favorite teams win. But as athletes, we have to realize the opportunities that we have when we are in the spotlight and the impact that we can have in our societies. So that's why I was very excited to participate in this panel, and I look forward to more engaged discussion as we answer additional questions.
Talia?
So thanks for being here. Appreciate you moderating.
Of course.
So just a little bit more background about me. I do have a history. I started in the NFL, working in public relations and community relations. Now I run a tactical solutions agency that operates right at the intersection of sports and entertainment, corporate and consumer brands, culture, and social impact. And what that basically means is we utilize the financial resources of corporate and consumer brands, the social equity of sports and entertainment properties, the cachet of culture, and we bring those together to enact social impact. So I'm kind of here from the perspective of ways to best utilize sports in advancing the mission of social impact. As it relates to the question that you asked with regards to athletes transitioning, during my years with the teams, one of the things that I became acutely aware of is that for most sports teams, particularly in the scouting process, intellect with athletes is considered a liability. And you can see that from high school to college and then in the pros, because they don't typically, they typically will kind of push the star athletes through. They'll, kind of put them in classes that are easier for them to pass. They'll, kind of put them in positions where they don't have to work as hard academically, because they want them to focus on their athleticism. And so one of the things that I would always talk to the guys about would be, making sure that they are focused on things that, really begin to use the time that they're playing, professionally in particular, to decide what it is that they want to do, be really clear with themselves about what they're passionate about, and then begin to network and work towards those goals while they're playing. Because to your point, the moment the light goes out and the last whistle blows, for most athletes, their star dims very, very, very quickly. And the people that used to pick up your call when you were playing, it takes them maybe a week or 2 weeks to get back to you, until ultimately they don't get back to you at all. Right. So when you're asking about, what should they be doing, I think it's a hard question, right? Because in my experience, many of the athletes that I've worked with aren't really encouraged to do anything other than play. And so for a lot of people, a lot of the guys that I've worked with, it's getting in contact and connected with people that are going to nurture that passion inside of them, whether it be impact, whether it be, technology, whether it be, they want to create content or whatever those things are. They just need to begin to get mentors. In the same way that I would have a mentor, you would have a mentor, athletes need to begin to understand who they are as people, because you play for such a short amount of time and you have so much more life to live, that it's important to figure that out, and a mentor would be great.
Thank you. Isaac?
This is great, just sitting here being able to listen. But thank you so much for having me and moderating and being on the panel with all these other special guests. But my story is very, I think, well known to some extent, in that being a student athlete and being able to play professionally, I was really what's talked about in the media in terms of being a statistic. I came out of Purdue, was not drafted, made the Indianapolis Colts, And even that decision was one that I was not prepared for, because as soon as the last pick goes in a draft, your phone starts ringing. And back then there was no call waiting, so virtually had like 2 phones, and you have the Colts on one and you have the Saints on the other, and a guy across the hall had my dad with the agent on the phone, and we decided where I should go and give myself the best prospects of making the team. And so I chose the Colts, and I made it. And what's ironic about that is that I actually broke into the starting lineup, and before we go to camp, we had our last practice, I got hurt. But because I had such a phenomenal mini camp and throughout the summer workouts, they kept me. And so that was a huge eye-opener, because I'm just getting looks all day long. You don't know what's going to happen. And this is the stuff that now you're just starting to see on like Hard Knocks through that kind of exposure. So I make the team, I play. My second year, I get hurt the first day of training camp. They keep me again. I played well my first year, things of that nature. They let me go. Fast forward to now I'm in Seattle 4 years later. One day I just can't get out of bed. I had no fluid in my L4 and L5, never knew it, never knew spinal stenosis, bone spurs were developing. It's just something that I chronically just managed, whether it be through Toradol or taking a lot of aspirin. You just got used to having a certain level of pain that you play through. I was fortunate to have really 2 solid parents who instilled at a young age that we were more than just athletes. I don't know if that's a byproduct of the fact that, they were pastors of a church, and, I'd been in and around, a faith-based atmosphere my entire life. But whatever it was, they didn't prepare me that, there's really nothing that compares to football or that sport. Everything else is such a distant second. But it took me a good 5-year period of time to figure that out. So now I have a younger brother who's about 5 years younger. Now he goes to Tennessee, and now he's playing. And at this point, I've already begun my foray into transition into the work world, and I'm at BlackRock, and similar to what Maya's saying, I was trying to reestablish myself professionally like I did athletically. But people see you as this person they knew on TV, and that's how they come at you. But I'm still studying for my Series 7. I'm still learning how to build a muni ladder and trade institutional accounts. And so the stress of balancing, their perception versus where I was on a learning curve, was really difficult to balance, because they expect you to come in and just know, or is he here just because of his contacts? Are they trying to roll him out in front of clients? It wasn't until I got to JP Morgan and I got a chance to work with, and if you don't know this, but their private bank it consists of their top third of their wealthiest accounts. I mean, these things start about north of 30 million liquid, right? So there's not very many African Americans, and there's not a lot of professional athletes. Matter of fact, there was none back at that time. And when I saw that you had these young guys coming out of college, and they were making 7 figures as quarterly bonuses, the light went off, and I'm like, why did someone not tell me that private equity existed? And then I'm taking it on like, man, I don't see people that look like me as clients of the private bank. And at that point, my brother's in his 2nd and 3rd year, and one of his teammates asked would I just look over some things for him. So I got one athlete, and then you get one, and then you get another. And slowly but surely, I began to amass, athletes as clients, as I was still working with business owners and other corporate executives. And so, my answer to that question is that I still feel like intrinsically, there's a battle that goes on within as to how we feel we're perceived versus how we actually are. And it's up to you to balance both of them and be able to now reassert yourself, to whether either you're removing any doubt or you're saying, hey, this is who I am today. But that's a process that takes place over time.
To that point, though, and this is just off the top of my head, having heard what you said, is do you think it's difficult to sometimes, for lack of a better term, convince people that the change you're looking to seek is real because of that superhero mentality? They might view it as self-serving, or somehow, at the end of the day, a lot of people tend to believe that in order to truly help others, you have to sacrifice something of your own. And if you're not a so-called normal person, then maybe you don't have as much skin in whatever social change there is. You see what I'm saying? And so I wonder, from all of you in your experiences, what, and we can start and go back the other way, is, maybe sometimes people how do you actually do it and convince people that I'm in this for the right reasons and not because I am trying to regain whatever level of fame it is that you might perceive me to have already had?
I think you win over people with your actions. You can say a lot, I'm changed, or I'm now moving on with a new chapter of my life, but over time, the story will begin to tell itself. And I know that sometimes you're having to, outlive previous antics, behaviors, or what their perceived public perception of you was based upon how you conducted yourself. But at the same time, I think what truly matters is, what your focus is. And in my case, it was, I need this job, I was blown away when I had the interview, and you're hearing that, what I paid in taxes my rookie year was almost equivalent to, what my salary was going to be, you know what I mean? And so I'm like, wow, psychologically that was, tough to get over. But over time I saw that people wanted to see me display how serious I was. And then they were raising their expectation up to the level that I was actually carrying myself or presenting myself in the workplace.
Well, I would say for myself, it's a very similar situation. I never made any apologies for being gifted with athleticism. I used it to my advantage. I used it to get a quality education at Florida State University. While I was at Florida State University, I just surrounded myself around positive people outside of football, because football is your life. I mean, 6-7 hours a day, you're practicing, film study. I just use my free time. My fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, was a savior, because I was around other young scholars that wanted something positive in their lives. And in fact, I think it was ingrained in me so much that it probably attenuated or short-circuited my NFL career, because I also was an undrafted college free agent, went to Cincinnati Bengals, and for the first time, when I was cut by the Bengals, for like the next 3 or 4 years, I received calls to come back into camp. But at that moment, it was like it was liberating for me. But I kept that same competitive drive to control my own destiny. I was student government vice president at Florida State, but I never thought that I would be in politics. I knew that I wanted to be a business owner, which I am. I own one of the fastest growing construction management companies in Florida, but I also serve as an elected official. But I use that same competitive drive, not necessarily to meet the expectations of people who I met, who remembered me as an athlete, but I used that competitive drive to be the best person that I wanted to be for what I was doing. And I encourage other athletes to do that as well. And so we have to unapologetically know that, you are who you are. And each of us have our own stories. Many of us up here happen to be athletes, but you have your own story, you have your own drive, your own determination. But I know athletes come with a different package in terms of the expectations, how folks view you and see you. But I think that when I walk into any scenario, I just apply the same principles of repetition, always running scared, because the guy that's behind me on the depth chart is looking to get my spot. So when I'm in business, when I'm making proposals for clients, it's the other firm that wants that contract. But no, you're not going to get the contract, because I put the work in every day to build the relationships, to build my craft, work on my craft, make sure my people are prepared. So I use that same competitive drive, and that's the same things that are innately in us as athletes can be easily transferred into the work environment, into the social service environment, to the civic engagement. So on the social side, wanting to give back and being the advocate, I apply the same principles. People looked at me like I was crazy when I said I was running for president of the United States. Yeah, I'm a mayor of the 13th largest city in Florida, doing wonderful things in our city. We're beating out China for jobs. We have one of the fastest growing economies in the country. And yet, I'm the first black mayor of my city. People thought I was crazy when I ran for mayor of my city. So it's those things, taking those challenges with that same athletic drive is, to me, was very easy. And that's what I try to instill in other athletes coming behind me, saying that you can do this, because many of them are intimidated, because all they know is from they were 5 years old, they've been playing sports and have known anything other than that sport. So helping them to transition their skills to other skills in the workplace, because if you're not pro athletically, you will be pro in something else and apply those same principles.
Closer to this question, you guys have a little more experience. So, you know, your words, Isaac, your words is, it's like, yeah, I've just started to learn this stuff. And just with my year, I've been away from the game going on a year, and thinking about my process and my journey, I'm like nodding with you. Like, you see, and the WNBA, I think, is getting better and doing a good job of trying to be intentional of helping the women think about transition, because we're not financially making as much, and so that's it's kind of like a no-brainer for us. So the struggle that you've had with the NFL guys of convincing them this matters, it's like, oh, we know this matters the whole time. So you've got some really quality professional people in the WNBA, and so, but I think we think that way maybe professionally, but where my heart is right now is more in the social lane of how can I take my experiences, my success, and jump into a social advocacy, political, it's all connected world. And I think the first place for me, coming from a family of educators, is I'm not going to do a lot until I feel like I've started my education process of learning the issues, looking at history. And so when you do transition into something else, we're watching film. So you're scout. It's that concept of preparation for the game, preparation for the task that is so easily transferable to whatever cause or world you're stepping into. And so for me, I started pursuing knowledge in criminal justice reform based off of a real life wrongful conviction case that I got to be involved in through my family's prison ministry activities over a decade ago. And because I was up close and personal with the real life horrors of our mass incarceration problem, I became motivated to learn. And I have a nonprofit called Win with Justice now, which is, it's really cool because there's an authentic case behind Win with Justice. Jonathan Irons is the man who's been wrongfully convicted for over 22 years that my family's been walking with him and fighting for him from my home state of Missouri. And this real life case is now spurred on this educational platform that Win with Justice is and is becoming, because I want people to enter into my journey. It's like I had to learn. I was intimidated because all you do is you show up, you do your job, you do whatever it takes to make sure you're as prepared as possible to get championships. In the meantime, you forget, oh, I'm like an adult now, and I'm also a citizen of my community. What does that even mean? Because I'm out here focused on other things. And so I've had that journey over the last 3 or 4 years of understanding I'm a citizen too. I'm a citizen first to the people. Citizen meaning I'm a part of a community. And so helping athletes and encouraging athletes who feel intimidated by that, I'm actually responsible to my community too, is something I'm passionate about through Win with Justice, and helping people get the education that they need. And one of the issues that I've been advised and mentored about focusing on is the role prosecutors play in our justice system. They're the most powerful actors essentially in our justice system, and prosecutorial misconduct is rampant over our country's history. And so I'm learning these things, I'm hearing and I'm understanding, oh, I get that because I'm an athlete, so I get how, prosecutors set the rules of the game. I get that. Okay, if they make the rules skewed in the beginning, of course we're not going to be able to get the victory. Or understanding the level of competitiveness in the prosecutorial culture of trying to get convictions and wins, but are we really winning? And so Win with Justice is, let's transform how we measure a win in our justice system so that we're actually winning for our communities. And then I realized, and I'm embarrassed to say this, we vote for prosecutors. And it's like, oh, we can do something about this. And so it's empowering for people, I think, when they realize, oh, I don't need to just learn about the problem. I can actually do something in how we vote. And so, you know, again, just growing up, being on the grind, you know, you don't feel like an informed voter all the time when you're an athlete. I know everything about that team, that person I'm guarding tomorrow, but do I know who my prosecutor is? And it's like, man, and I'm learning these things, you know, growing up, realizing, okay, this is important, and just trying to share that on the Win with Justice platform, and in the meantime, campaign for Jonathan's freedom and the bigger issue that his one case represents. And so, but that transfer of, I get the winning, I get the team, I get the community element of the team experience, and transferring that into our justice system. I think I'm just excited because I feel like we're just scratching the surface in the sports world of leveraging the passion and the awesomeness of sport and that culture into our justice system. So I've been meeting people like Brian Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative down in Montgomery, and I'm like, these are our educators, like they're doing the work to help us be informed. And so I was just on a call with them earlier this week, and we were all like giddy on the phone of just the potential that we as athletes can have in helping to kind of change the narrative of, you know, our justice system. So just, yeah, I can totally see and starting to experience and learn it's all transferable to the social and advocacy world, so.
Paxton, I know it's a little different for you, having worked with artists. You know, it's a slight, I mean, it's similar in that the fame quotient is there, but, you know, artists sort of never really leave the spotlight in the same way because you don't necessarily retire, and it's a different thing. I mean, what have you found in terms of, you know, who you've worked with in the past, not just yourself, and them trying to enact whatever changes they're looking to do in their lives, and how easily they've been able to do it or not do it based on what they view of themselves?
Gotcha. Well, my mentor in that space is my adopted pop, and to me, one of the greatest human beings I've had the honor to know. That's Harry Belafonte. Mm-hmm. And his mentor was Paul Robeson, who, I don't know, anybody in this room know Paul Robeson? All right. Okay. A true giant. And Harry's, one of his best friends, of course, was Dr. King. And he spent years and time and hours, and some of the stories he shared with me have been nothing short of amazing. Paul Robeson, at the height of his fame, kept activism as a consistent part of his life, and he passed it on to a number of the people who came up under him. Harry's been consistent with it the whole of his life, and made a lot of changes in his personal life to be friends with Dr. King, because he didn't want any of that to ever kind of shine on his mission, and made changes in his personal life and sacrificed things in his personal life to be friends with him. And one of my other good friends, who has a big documentary out right now called The Black Godfather, that's Clarence Avant, who is a businessman, and the greater part of that story talked about the business side of his life and the changes there, but it did not really shed a lot of light on. Clarence is one of the greatest fundraisers for the civil rights movement. And so those are two kind of beacons in my life who shared a lot with me. Never sought fame for the things that they did behind the scenes, by way of really sharing of themselves to make a real true difference. But Harry has been probably the greatest activist. Another friend, the big brother, is Danny Glover, who came up under Harry and considers him his greatest mentor. And everything from working with black farmers to working with inner city youth programs, gangs, making sure from a business perspective that African Americans were represented in a wide array of different places we probably have never gotten into. So those have been my guiding lights. You are correct in that the difference between an athlete who has a prescribed career, entertainers are a bit different, because it's like working beyond a hit, but they're still out working and touring on kind of like that song. And for some of them, literally, it was one song that kind of broke the ground from them. They never really had a second hit on the other side of it. Entertainers traditionally have not been as activated from a social perspective, but you have, as I mentioned, kind of like many, many lights of them. From the athletic side, for me, observing people like Jim Brown, Curt Flood, certainly Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell, like great legendary human beings who went well beyond their sport to make a massive, significant
Kurt Flood,
impact.
for those of you who don't
And
know,
all
is
of
the
us here
reason-
today.
I just want to explain who Kurt Flood is. He's the
Oh.
reason why free agency exists in sports.
Does anybody know who Kurt Flood is in here? No? Okay.
He was a baseball player. It's all.
Why don't you just explain a little bit of who he
Well,
is?
I mean, Kurt Flood is the first guy who said, I'm just not going to play for whoever the team wants me to play for because my rights are not controlled. It's a long thing. You can Google it, but that's who Kurt Flood is. He's the reason why basically athletes can play where they sort of choose within the context of drafts and all that stuff.
Correct. He pretty much had said that the system of athletics at the time that he came along was almost a different version of slavery.
Right.
And he had no option to control where it was that he was going. Literally changed the whole of modern sports. And had he not have come along at the time that he did, made the sacrifices that he did, the athletes today wouldn't be enjoying anywhere near the freedom and rights that they have.
There are
today.
people who believe that Kurt Flood is more important to sports than, say, Jackie Robinson, which is an arguable point on a separate level, but you get the idea.
Right, right. So I guess I hope I answered the question of that with people like Harry. He used entertainment as a platform to basically showcase his civil rights thinking, and he's 92 now, and he still feels the exact same way today. When you talk with him, he's like, my body is not what it used to be, but my mind is as sharp as ever. So,
one of the things that I think a lot of, at least what fans tell me when I see them, is they feel that, it's one thing to see an athlete say, hey, go do this, but what their contributions can be is often, as John Q. Public or Kwame Q. Public, whatever, they don't necessarily know what do we do. You know what I mean? If I'm used to just watching you on stage, or if I'm used to just watching you on the field, it's one thing for, I don't know, Colin Kaepernick to go, say whatever message he wants to say to whomever, but it's another thing for the people who feel that they are fans to feel empowered to do something on their own. What do you think, if you were to suggest to people, just in a general context of how to be a responsible fan and a responsible citizen, how do you tie those things, without feeling like you're sort of selling out one or the other from a standpoint of a spectator or a listener or a viewer or what have you? That's for any of you.
I think one of the things that I'll say is that one of the initiatives that we have is an all-sport voter registration and engagement initiative called Don't Drop the Ball, Vote. And, piggybacking on some of what Maya said, a lot of people don't know that, where they're out, protesting mass incarceration or over-policing and police brutality, they don't realize that a lot of that stuff can be handled at the local level. People don't understand that they vote for prosecutors, that the prosecutors are the single most powerful position in the criminal justice system. But another position that's very, very powerful is the jury. And, with the all-sport voter registration initiative that we have on the registration side, we are partnering with sports venues across the country to allow voter registration opportunities in sports venues leading up to the 2020 election. And then on the engagement side, we have a number of small think tanks that we're doing across the country where we're bringing together local sports assets, local businesses, and local grassroots organizations to ideate around very strategic and intentional strategies to mobilize local voters to participate not just in the general election, but down ballot issues, midterms, and as well as local elections. But the extension of that is in the same way a lot of people don't realize that the prosecutors are very, very powerful. They also don't realize that us failing to serve on juries also participates and contributes to mass incarceration. Right. And in most municipalities across the country, the jury pool is pulled from the voter registration polls.
100%
and so
correct.
if you don't register to vote, then you will not get pulled for called for jury duty.
Correct.
And, so to your point about what can fans do, for us, what we're trying to do is make it very simple, where we are trying to encourage the athletes to register to vote and to actually vote and to show people that they're doing that and that they're not just registering, but if they're already registered, letting people see them checking their status to make sure, because, Stacey Abrams has this whole voter protection initiative that she's got right now, because there are people that have been registered to vote that are lawfully should lawfully be able to vote, but are being purged from the voter polls, and that's we can get into that. That's a whole nother thing. It's a whole nother thing.
That's for a separate
But
panel.
from a simple perspective, what we're doing is trying to have athletes use their platform to encourage citizens to vote, but then also helping the athletes understand their power, but then helping citizens to understand their power, because many people feel overwhelmed by the idea of a presidential election. But if you start thinking about it smaller, like I'm voting for a prosecutor, I'm voting for city council, I'm voting for school board representatives, then they can begin to see their powers and can be a lot more effective in the things that they're, I don't want to say complaining about, but the things that they are conversing intensely about.
Right, on their mind.
On social media, they can.
Right,
They
and
can
when
step in.
you work in you literally deal with voters. So,
Yeah.
I guess for you, Mayor, like where does that come from the other side? How do you, it's one thing for you to go out and say, you can do, I can do this for you, but how do you, empower people to do the same for their communities and for themselves?
Well, I think because I'm in my role from a very untraditional path. Here you have a first-generation American who comes from a family where football is soccer, goes on to play football at a premier university, Florida State, one of the traditional football teams. We're not playing that way now, but in the 90s we held our own. However, then go on to go into a very white male-dominated industry in terms of providing professional services and construction management, and then to run for office in a city that's not all black but very diverse. So I try to use my experience as an example. I am someone who's not supposed to be in the seat talking to you based on if you were to look at my life story, my beginnings, and someone was to say and to predict what would a little Wayne Messam grow up to be. Yeah. I would not be what many people would think I would have grown up to be. So I try to use that example to inspire others. And many people vote for me just because they remember me catching touchdowns or being a former athlete. And that's okay. And I think that's how we can empower athletes, because, especially when you look at us as a people, as black people, we drive culture. When you look at most industries, blackism, like I like to call it, drives pop culture. Adidas and Nike went out to get athletes and celebrities to promote their brand. And now that becomes the thing. Artists, entertainers, the same way. So if we can be seen and emulated in sports and entertainment, and little black kids, white kids, Latino kids want to be like us in that field, it can be the same thing in financial services, in public service, in social services, in any industry, because we are that good. And we have to believe first that we're that good.
Okay. I have a couple more questions for specifically before we open it up to people. And Isaac, this one's for you in terms of the concept of entrepreneurship. Money is obviously important. And, I know a lot of athletes blow a lot of cash on a lot of dumb crap, for lack of a better term. You know what I mean? And I don't just mean that in terms of gaudy stuff for themselves, but I mean in terms of like business opportunities that have failed, trying to make them more rich and so on and so forth. But I guess I'm asking you about, what the role of, in your opinion, money and entrepreneurship is regarding social change in this way. How can those things come together as you understand it from your time and your dealings in business, to do things in more ways than just plain platform. There's a way to finance, a way to build that has involved more than just say, hey, look at me, now go do this. I'm wondering what your experience is in the business world that has allowed you to see that there are different ways to do this that aren't necessarily that.
Absolutely, and I feel that, a lot of conversations we have, regardless of if you're undrafted free agent like myself or one who goes in the first round, is that we all have a platform regardless of size, and that applies to non-athletes as well. But secondarily, the Bible says that where your heart is, so too is your treasure. And so we talk about the things that reside within the heart. What do you want to do beyond the sport? And particularly, I get involved at whether it's tax time or, I want to do something that's philanthropic, or, how can I, create a deduction here or there. now we go out to our network and we start looking at different institutions and ways in which we can apply our funds. And I always have this conversation about there's ways that you can help. You can physically get involved. You can lend your name. Your labor. You can volunteer your time. Or you can put some of your hard-earned resources to work. And that's where the heart truly comes in at, because it's up to me to help them qualify if that issue is really a hard issue. Because if it's a hard issue, you'll do it when there's no spotlight. You'll show up when there's no camera. And then the conversation evolves into what can I truly become an advocate for, that once I stop playing, I'll still have a vested interest in wanting to promote and sustain. And that's a much different conversation, and it rarely happens in one meeting. Because even in the first year where, I don't really like to invest the players' money because they have to understand how to save. And I know that that's completely different, because a lot of advisors get paid on assets under management, but you have to understand that, where purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. So if you don't really understand the purpose, for why God gifted you the way he did, or what to do once this money comes into your possession, then you'll squander it, And so for us, it's a more sustained conversation, but I will say this, we start very, very small, and we say, you can advocate for your family. So if that's creating a better and a safer environment for them to live in, then we count that as a success. Secondarily, we take time to do the due diligence and research before we even put a dollar anywhere. We get approached with a lot of things, whether it's cannabis today, whether it was, I got a partner who wants to start a t-shirt line, or whether it's, this is a can't miss opportunity.
Record company.
They have a business plan and we can't look at it. But what I'm saying is that, that's one way that I qualify, is that we're slow to move on it. And if they still feel persistent, then we go from there. But then we have to really now bring people around us to provide counsel, and so that has served as a secondary layer to either validate whether this is a good opportunity or not, or if this is something that the client himself was serious. But what I will say is that it is such a antagonistic war and fight for players' names, their likeness, their hard-earned money, and it's not really clear up front until you get in on the back end. I've had nonprofits, and I won't go off on a soapbox here, but to where now agents have taken over a player's nonprofit. Things that were started out in a favorable light, just to transition and be more controlling. And I'll close here, but I'll say that athletes carry weight. Their name carry weight. Right. Their reputation, their profession carries weight. And it's up to them to be able to control the narrative in terms of what they get involved in, and to see through that what they're getting involved in is something that is going to withstand, not just the present, but something that's going to be here for a long duration of time. Thank you.
Maya, this is a question I have for you specifically, which is about social media, because for lack of a better term, you're the superstar here on this panel in terms of what public visibility is, and a lot of people follow you. A lot of people are plugged into your channels, and I would like to get your thoughts on how social media fits into all of this, in your opinion, in terms of, people talk about hashtag activism, but in a very real way, a lot of people know about a lot more things as a result of what they see online and what is spread through said word. And I'd like your thoughts on just sort of the responsibility of that, and how you handle that from your standpoint, not just in terms of your own causes and desires, but how you see how that's developed in the time that it has grown to what it is now.
It's funny you're asking about social media. I tweet maybe like once a month.
Yeah. Well, I know this because you tweeted something and had my name in it, and there were just a gazillion replies, and I was like, wow, okay, this is a much bigger thing. Not that I didn't know that, but it came to my mind as a result of that.
Yeah. Gosh, this could be an entire panel discussion. The phenomenon of social media. I feel like I'm extremely, I don't use social media, I think, in a normal way. I remember in college when I'm younger in the room, but now I'm gonna kind of age myself. It's like social media was just kind of really, like Twitter was starting to really pop off, and I remember thinking, man, should I get a handle? Should I, what should I do with this? And I just remember, walking into my apartment, feeling like the Lord put on my heart, like, just worry about the people you're around right now. Just focus on being present, and all the social media will take care of itself. And I really feel like that philosophy and that wisdom has helped me use my platform so much better, to where I feel like my social media should be an extension of my real life. And when I tweet, I'm very intentional about it, or IG or whatever on social media. It's usually showing people something that I care about, that I'm doing. Not so much just spouting off my opinions. I want my platform to be used for meaningful things. So I have kind of a less is more, and that's, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I think in general, it's wise to be less is more. But when I do post things, I want it to be pointing people to helpful resources, or maybe inspiring them with something cool in my life, or maybe even being vulnerable about, this is hard, just kind of just being intentional with social media, because I think it can be abused. Obviously, everyone in this room knows how to abuse social media, and it can be unhelpful and add chaos and confusion. It's also, social media is it's shallow. And so it's not the best platform to really have deep dive anythings. And so I like to use social media to point people to deeper things, like using it to point people to an event where we're going to be voting. That's wonderful, giving people more information to help educate. That's really where as an athlete, we have to be so careful, like you were saying, with our name means a lot, and people listen. And if you overburden your platform with things that aren't important, things can get lost. So I try to use my platform to give substance, and sometimes light and fun. That's necessary too. But that's my general philosophy. Okay. I love to point people to things that are helpful, not necessarily just spouting off my opinion all the time, but encouraging people to go beyond this engagement and to come to something like this. It's more than living life on the screens, but actually living life and pointing people to opportunities to live more meaningful, deeper life and environment. So that answers your question.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Paxton, I would like to get your thoughts on that from the entertainment side as well, because you've been around this business for so long, and I just wonder, in terms of actual interfacing with humans, in terms of activism, how has social media, in your opinion, just really shifted or not shifted, or helped or hurt, or just, where is that in your experience with you in this business?
Well, from a pure television perspective, it's changed the whole paradigm of television. At one point, TV was the main screen and pretty much was everything other than a film. But social media has, from a monetization point of view, the viewership and the engagement on social media is much broader than television now. So from that perspective, money started to spread and go a whole lot of different places. And because of that spread, it's only going to continue more and more and more. And the larger platforms of Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr, Twitch, the platforms are going to continue to grow, and billions of people are spreading across all of the platforms. Now, it is the single largest, pretty much, place to find and see things. I think part of the beauty of it is you can actually tell your own story, whereas in the past, someone from an athletic perspective, you're going to an ESPN or the sports channels or like the sports segments to kind of like tell your stories and make a statement. Whereas now your platform is what you actually put up by way of what you want to say about yourself, and it's a truer, more meaningful, and it's direct to consumer. The other part of it is the followers can actually interface with you because they're giving you feedback in real time, And I think probably the people on this panel actually read their own, like what your followers actually say to you and respond back to them. That didn't exist before. With television, it was just a one-way story.
Right.
And also it was slanted by who the interviewer was who was interviewing you. And if they take your interview and cut it up, they're going to cut out certain things and have you say things that a lot of times might have been out of context. Whereas when from your own platform, you were telling your own story, your own raw, unabated truth that you want to say about yourself and things that you want to say that are meaningful to you. So it gives you that door, and I think that's pretty amazing. If you look at, we were talking earlier about the activist athlete, and I mentioned people like Jim Brown or Muhammad Ali or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. When they stepped out to take that stand, at that point, it was only the main networks, and that was ABC, CBS, and NBC. It wasn't Fox or any of those others that came along. So it was those three channels, and the interviewers were all non-African American for the most part. There was very few African American journalists during that period of time. So it was them trying to tell a story in sound bites, purely with the general media kind of siphoning off just what they wanted. And then newspapers were still, very much paramount at that period of time. So social media has opened all those doors up. You can tell your story. You can get feedback instantly. And you're going outside of, let's veer for a hot second, but for the cycles for entertainers, it was your albums. And it was the same kind of a thing. There was a portal or platform on how you got a chance to tell your stories around that, whereas now they can tell their story, right? So when you see an African-American who dies nowadays, so for example, James Ingram, a R&B singer who was not a massively now popular R&B singer, for me on social media, everybody knew James Ingram passed because you had Gladys Knight writing it, you had Verdine White from Earth, Wind & Fire doing it. You had like so many different people, their peers who loved them. And they're telling that story. Outside of that, it's a blurb on maybe a Billboard clip or something like that. R&B singer James Ingram died, or maybe someone says it on CNN, right? But no, the black community came together to say this brother was one of us. He was a beautiful human being. He passed, and we'll miss him. So I think it opens up all of that and really has been a game changer in that regard.
Which is the reason why I brought it up. I think that a lot of, not to opine here, but I think that's a lot of the difficulty that I think a lot of people who are fans have. They don't connect to things unless they believe that people care in a certain way. And I think social media has really allowed a humanization, like you talked about, Maya, of people to let them know, we're real people too. Sometimes I, don't like the cereal I had this morning. The inane goes as well with the heavy. And I don't know, I think that's an important thing. Does anybody have any questions? Who wants to? All right. I trust you.
Yes, well, good morning. My name is Ronald Bethea. I founded an organization called the Black Sports Legends Foundation in 2010. And we found that foundation to tell the story of the Jay Gaithers, of the Fritz Pollards. And people may not know who Fritz Pollard was, but he was the first African American who founded the old Black Negro NFL, which the NFL outlawed in 1938. Most of us never knew. Just like the Negro leagues, there was a Negro NFL league that existed in this country. And what we tried to do, we launched a film festival at Morgan State showing pictures like Black Magic that spoke to the issue about those black athletes who were the forerunners who broke down the doors of Jim Crow, racism, and segregation in this country. And we talk about those black high schools that existed, the FAMUs, the impact. You're talking about Florida State in Tallahassee. I talk about FAMU and Jay Gaither. I talk about the Eddie Hertz, which was the first All-American from Howard University, and Charles Drew, who founded Blood Plasma. I had the privilege of playing at Morgan in 1971 because I played ball with a gentleman named Bill Rhoden, who wrote $40 Million Slave. And Bill and I spent a lot of time before he got that script written, but we were talking about how do we reach the young millennial and the young athletes today to get them to tell their story. And I think it's important to get your stories told, because our young people coming up, they won't know your stories in a few years, because as you say, when the ball goes out the air, I know Coach Thompson at Georgetown very, very well, and he always kept a basketball flat. And one thing when he recruited athletes, he would tell them, and one of the biggest problems I've had is to get the advertising dollars and the advertising agencies to put the money into telling the stories about individuals such as yourself. So I want to thank you for hosting this panel. I think it's very, very important, because I've recruited, I've coached athletes, and I've sent most of those athletes to HBCUs. But the fact of the matter is, we lost a great deal with integration, because we don't have those black high school coaches that really care about our black athletes, and that mentoring, and those folk who would see you in the street, and they didn't have to be your father and your mother, and they saw those abilities in you, and they would pick you up and take you to school. So I want to thank you for hosting this panel, and once again, please, please tell your stories, because our young people need to hear about you after the game, not just on the field.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question? If you could just direct your question to one of the panelists, that'd be great.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for having us. I'm a little long-winded. I didn't get the memo from Io to put on my suit. I just left the gym, actually. So 2 quotes. So the first one, there's a difference between a gladiator and a warrior. Anybody know? All right. Well, one fights for money, one fights for a cause. My name is Gerald Jackson Jr. I'm a professional athlete. I'm a business owner of a successful streetwear brand called Defeat the Day, and I'm right now working on a startup as well, a platform for athletes. I heard a lot about transitions, next levels, but what about mental health? I heard about free agency. I heard about earthly battles. I heard about earthly achievements, and I say that humbly because I haven't achieved what many of you guys have yet. Just got done couch surfing last year, but anyway, it's another story. I'm a firm believer that we own nothing on this earth but our soul. Anybody agree? My question, I'll get there. It's about mental health. I just wanted to say, got you. We could talk about injustice and transitions, but what about the many issues surrounding mental health? I heard no one mention that. Me personally, the question
Maya
was
mentioned mental health earlier.
Because I heard you, when you mentioned, you said you had an unconditional path, and I can relate to that as well. So I just want to say, how did you handle mental health? You know, what were your strategies for the next generation? Because the last quote was from Jay-Z. He said, "It took me 26 years to find my path. My only job is to cut the time in half." So, thank you.
That is an excellent question. Mental health is something that I think specifically in our community is not addressed in ways that matter. And I don't necessarily know that everybody even sees the connectivity between activism and mental health because, well, it's not something you can put a dollar sign on or a score on, And as somebody, Wayne specifically, who deals with, and Talia, I'm going to ask you about this as well, because former athletes, I feel like, have a lot of issues with this. I just wonder, is that underserved in the context of what we believe we're trying to do for activism, the mental health world? I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for that question. I'm a huge proponent of mental health. I go to therapy every Tuesday at 12:15. I don't miss. I think it's very important. I think it's an unfortunate thing that it, up until this point, hasn't really been a big issue in our community. It's something that we've kind of shied away from, but I don't know if you've been paying attention, but that conversation has changed, brother. Like with Charlemagne the God, with Taraji P. Henson, with Common, like their conversation is out there. Like it has turned in the most beautiful way, because what people are now positioning mental health as is not that there's somebody crazy, that they have some issue. It's really about evolution and being the very best person that you can be. And as it relates to athletes, I absolutely believe that therapy, mental health support on teams is incredibly important. I don't know if you guys saw that Cube with the big three brought in mental health professionals to serve the athletes. I think the NBA is also doing some work around that.
Yeah.
I want to say the NFLPA is also talking about doing some work around that. Don't worry, I got you, bro. I see you, Joe. So the work is there. People are starting to recognize it, and I appreciate that you see it, but that work is coming. That work is definitely coming. Okay, you got more lyrics? Okay. All right. Okay.
My brief response is that obviously mental health in the Black community has been taboo, but it has those barriers have fallen. I know a lot of colleges and universities have resources, healthcare professionals that help their athletes, and mental health is a big issue. I mean, every athlete that has lived this life and have gone through this, and when their careers have sunset, there's a bit of probably even unknown depression that takes place. So it's prevalent because that was your life. So brothers and sisters need to know that there are resources that are out there and that it's normal. It's like any major life change. Your body, your mind, everyone responds differently. Some handle it better than others. So it is there, resources are there, and it's okay to seek help and counseling.
Anybody else with thoughts? Isaac, I know you said you went through injury. I know that's part of it.
Real quick, we were at the Players Trust this morning, and we were talking about how I took advantage of the brain and body that's put on, and I went to Mass General, and for 4 days got examined head to toe. And the day I was flying out, they brought the doc in, and she goes, hey, Mr. Jones, two things. One, you have a concentration of T2 cells right here, which makes you more susceptible to headaches. And the second thing is that, hey, we want you to go to Jefferson when you get back to Philly. We see something in the middle of your brain, but we wouldn't let you leave here if it wasn't, life-threatening. And then they read back to me my conversation with the psychologist while I was there. And that was the first time I had really ever come face-to-face with, hey, was I really plain angry all these years? Was that my aid and my competitive advantage? You know what I'm saying? And how has that transferred over into my relationships, and how do I, manage certain types of situations right now? And I came face to face with it, and we got on a conversation with a therapist and my wife just to kind of talk to, because I didn't know, but I wanted to be educated, because I didn't want something to manifest, in my family down my line, or just go around the rest of my life not knowing that I was, impaired in some way, right? So it's very real. I think it's something that now I do a lot at universities. I was just at Purdue. They just brought me back, and this is one of the things that we led with, was having a more direct conversation, because now there's offshoots of this, violence, irritability and all these things. So, great question, and just know that there's a lot that's going on.
Can I just add one other thing?
Absolutely.
You both bring up really good points. One of the things that you said, Wayne, made me think about even mental health support around the transition into the NFL, right? Because at that point you become with, either you have like this survivor's guilt, or you end up with this savior's complex. Right. And there's understanding, there really does need to be support in that way to figure out how best to solve for that. And then the other side of it is coming out, there's a lot of guys that are flat broke within a very short amount of time after leaving professional sports, also divorce, broken families, all of these things, because there's a level of almost like PTSD that happens where they don't know how to adjust, and they're shifted just from the hot cold so quickly they don't know how to adjust. So I just wanted to make that point because I forgot to mention that when you guys.
It's the reason the main connectivity I think between mental health and activism is just understanding the people around you. You look at so many situations in terms of, frankly, people getting shot by the police. It's because there was a mental health situation that maybe somebody didn't understand, and if everybody is, sort of more open about how we can discuss and analyze each other, well, then everybody is just safer. So that's just how I look at it.
Just wanted to add one last
simple. That's just a
one
short
last
description.
Connection. I think from what all of us are saying was one of the first things that I talked about, which is community. And mental health is always connected to community and your willingness to see people and to be seen. And as athletes, I think we have an extra challenge that I love that idea of the mental health aspect going in, being more talked about, because how you're seen and how you see people instantly changes when you have that platform. And so that part I was saying earlier about there's kind of an unhealthy, kind of unnormal experience you have when you have that platform to where people see you as a means to an end or see you differently and you have to appear strong all the time. And it makes it really hard mentally for you to let anybody into what's going on in your head. The plain angry thing that's like, yeah, because I have to, like, it totally makes sense of maybe changing the narrative to, but still making it safe for these warriors to, be seen and to be known and to making sure that's addressed for athletes of all levels. Because once we lose that connection once you reestablish that connection, everything else is easier. Being a better citizen, knowing how to connect to people, knowing how to find your passion, it all unfolds when we fight for that connection to community in a safe way for the athletes, and that transition's easier. My year away has been able to be so much smoother because I have that community. It was already established, and my identity didn't drop to the floor the minute to say I'm not going to be a pro for a year, and I'm still okay. And so it's just all those levels of entry, of early, middle, transition. It's all connected to that, I think, an unhealthy stigma that we have as athletes of, I got to hold it all together and keep it all in here. That doesn't mean you go sharing every detail of your life on social media, connecting all these questions here.
That's the idea.
But, being seen on Twitter is not being seen. That's not real. Like being seen by people. So I'm excited to continue that conversation. Hopefully we can continue to make that less of a taboo, which has already started.
Thank you, Brian. We got one more. There you go. Hey.
Cool. Hey, Joe Briggs, NFL Players Association. Thank you very much for this panel. I just want to say thank you for that last comment about community. One of the reasons why that that answer is most important to me is because by the time those young men become professional athletes, come to the NFL Players Association as our members, they've already had 10 years worth of trauma that they've built up that no one has addressed.
Yep.
And I really wish we would start having that conversation. You're right, Ms. Boone. The NFL and NFL Players Association just started a new partnership where we're going to have mental health professionals on every NFL team throughout the National Football League so that we can help those young men when they come in the door, know that there's someone that can help them talk through the issues that they may have. The anxiety that comes from constantly being evaluated, which is something that most people in their lives do not have, that professional athletes have on a daily basis. When you have those film sessions, when you have those conversations with your position coach, when you have those conversations with the person signing your checks about whether those checks will continue to come. But the real conversation that's often missed is how those high school kids are dealing with those same levels of anxiety. How those little league kids are dealing with those same levels of anxiety, and how those layers of anxiety build upon one another. By the time they become professional athletes, it is almost too late to go back and do the trench work in that community. And because of that, the community is suffering. The leaders that we have in our communities often come through sports. However, there are other leaders outside of sports as well, some of which choose not to go into sports simply because they don't want to deal with the anxiety. So if we start addressing mental health, my hope is by working on this project with the NFL and the NFL Players Association to get mental health professionals on each team, we can start destigmatizing what it's like to have mental health professionals go talk to the student athletes at high school levels, the same way we did with athletic training a few years ago when we started pushing for high schools to have athletic trainers and medical professionals on the sidelines at games because of concussion protocols that we created at the professional level and pushed out to those levels as well. So I applaud you and this panel and you, Ms. Moore, for bringing that community piece into this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
My name is Demai Douglas. I have two questions. The first is for Ms. Moore. Myself and my friend Jalen here are students at UConn, so we want to get a photo with fellow Husky after the panel.
Let's go. Done.
The second goes to the theme of the panel. The theme of the panel is sustaining success, but my question is more directed to before you make it there. So during the college years, there's a lot of debate right now about how do you prepare for the success during high school, and in particular during college, a lot of the college debate revolves right now around compensation, particularly with the legislation going on in California, or if you saw Tim Tebow's remarks this morning.
Compensation for student athletes, to be clear.
Right. So my question is, having been there, how do you think that the college time as a student athlete can help prepare for both success in the professional level and success after the professional level?
I think that's a great question. I think just by the nature of being an athlete and preparation and practice, it really builds a lot of skills in terms of game planning, individual improvement, correction. You heard the word evaluation, and then game time. I mean, it's the same thing. You know, you're going into your professional life outside of sports. You know, knowing your industry, knowing your craft, practicing and getting better. So again, that transferable skills. So I think playing sports is, whether you go pro or not, it just has so many benefits in terms of being in a team environment, learning how to win, learning how to take losses, and building upon that. So there's a lot of skills. I think the topic of compensation at the collegiate level is a whole nother discussion. Me personally, I think there should be some form of compensation. What that looks like would have to be determined. But you brought up Tebow's discussion. You know, it's very convenient for someone like Tebow to take his position when he's coming from a, I don't know his personal life, but I do know that he did not necessarily have a tough upbringing coming up, right? So there may be some level of privilege in terms of what he sees as his norm and going to play for a university, for the banner of the university, where you have a majority of the players that are coming from less privileged positions and don't necessarily have the same financial footing that he had going into the University of Florida, of which he did. He may have a different perspective, but everybody's perception is their own reality. But I think, though, that there needs to be a serious discussion in terms of compensation at the collegiate level, what that looks like. I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I think that's maybe a good discussion for this organization to take up.
I'll just add one small thing here, and this is a little bit different, but I just mentioned going back to Purdue, and the one thing I talked about at the John Wooden Leadership Institute is that no one ever talked about handling adversity when I was in school. We talk about what to do to become successful, how to transition, comparable systems in the NFL and things of that nature. But I feel like some young guys unravel when they really are faced with a tough situation. Mm-hmm. Whether it's, the death of a parent, or whether it's the stress of managing, not having enough while you're in school, or just the fact that, heck, your girlfriend could have dumped you on Twitter. You know what I'm saying? But that is such a key and essential piece in being able to just manage life in general. Mm-hmm. It even plays into the mental health issue. And I would say that, yes, I've had clients who haven't known how to write a check, but there's been people there to help take them under their wing to explain some of those essential key components of just being a citizen within a community, that have really helped me lessen that learning curve, post my collegiate career. But I just say this is that there are a lot more things in place now on the college campus to help guys with financial literacy, with being able to transition into the workplace, resume building, networking, all that kind of stuff. But I really think some of the mental issues, mainly how to handle adversity, how to be able to communicate clearly, are things that you're going to be doing for the rest of your life and play a huge, a significant part in your success post-athletics.
Here we go. Okay. Hello. Ariel Atkins, a professional women's basketball player. My question is for Maya. Playing year-round as a women's basketball player, we don't really have time to go home and kind of be in our community. So my question is, with you kind of traveling and moving all the time, how did you figure out what you were actually interested in, and how were you able to kind of get in your community?
Yeah. Hey, sister. It's so hard. I mean, half the people don't know how hard it is to do what we do. It is quite phenomenal if you if any of you know personally a WNBA player, and we're playing 2 to 3 seasons a year, traveling all over the world, don't have as many of the, don't have as much money to be able to hire someone full-time to do something for us that we need done. It's like mama or auntie, or it's really difficult. So so when we do things, it's even more phenomenal because of the grind that it is what we do. So I say all that to acknowledge, yes, the grind that you're talking about. How do we, with the grind, have community, get educated, stay connected, and I can't say that there's an equation or an easy solution, because that's part of the cost of doing what we do. When we're overseas and making money in Europe or Asia, we're not in our communities. And so that's why I think it's really helpful to, when you network and have relationships, is you continue to meet people that you know are rooted in the places that you want to be or care about. And so you have to depend on those relationships of those people, and doing that wisely and taking your time of, this is my go-to people or this is my go-to group, to stay connected and involved, because you physically and sometimes emotionally can't really be there because we're grinding so hard somewhere else. And so understand we can't do everything and we can't be fully in everything. So for this season of life, while you are grinding, find some of those people. Again, it's coming back to community. Continue to develop a community in those areas that you're passionate about, at home, in your place. I can call Mr. or Miss so-and-so because they can tell me about the prosecutor stuff, or they can tell me about whatever it is. Because if you try to do it all by yourself, it's just hard and it's intimidating, it's overwhelming. And so I would just say continue to try to find those people who are rooted and reliable and have some experience in those areas that you're passionate about, connected to your community or connected to what you're passionate about, because that's certainly helped me. There was a couple of key people that just sparked my whole educational journey, and it's made like a huge difference. I'm a totally different person than I was 3 years ago when I started on this educational journey, and it leads to more people, and by the time you do eventually hang them up, you'll have that work already started. So,
and I think we'll get close to ending on that note. We started a little late, so we're not going to do the same disservice to the next group, and it gives us a little time to mingle. So I would like to say thank you to everybody on the panel. Round of applause, please. And I hope beyond having just your questions answered, I hope there were some tangible things that everybody here feels they can take to wherever they may be and do with whomever you choose. So thank you for that, and I appreciate the time. And here's Kevin.
Give me a second.
Thank you, Clinton. Please give him a round of applause for his moderation skills, moderator. A lot of what we covered today, we would love to go more in depth, but I definitely know that we covered some great topics here for each and every one of us. I know I got some good stuff out of this, and the goal for us is to continue to sustain success. We are a very, very powerful community if we come together. And having courageous conversations like this, topics of mental health, topics of activism, topics of transition, et cetera, we need to build on those. My hope is to be able to come back again in the future and deliver more powerful people that we have. Wouldn't you also agree with me? We had a great panel today, right? Please give it up for them. Paxton, Maya, Wayne, Talia, and my man Isaac. You all are phenomenal. Thank you so much for the gift of time. We won't get that back again, so I hope everybody got something out of this. And we'd love to build with you in the future, each and every one of you, so I'd love to reach out to you in the future. We're going to be here for a minute or two as we transition, so feel free to come up and talk to everyone and engage. That's one of the things about being at the CBC. It's a powerful opportunity for each of us to do this, because we don't get together like this enough. So let's build on it, people. Take a piece of this with you and move it forward. Not just courageous conversation, but courageous activation. All right? Thank you for coming. God bless you. Safe travels on your way home. Thank you all.